You are listening to Withstood, produced by Crossbrand.
All right. Hey, we are on our second podcast. You are my second victim. I hate to tell you, but
Cannot believe I had to follow Jason.
I know.
That's the scary
I
thing.
know. Nobody else was willing to do it. I found you as my only second victim after that wild sucker being on here. We want to welcome you to Withstood. We're excited about what God's doing with this podcast, and it's just stories. It's just stories. Today I have Jeff Bishop here as our guest on our podcast today, and Jeff and I go way, way back. When did we meet?
About 2003.
Yeah,
2004.
2003, 2004.
Under in the Durham building in Fairleigh, Texas. That's the first time I remember meeting you.
That's right. What were we doing?
You'd come over to visit Shannon and Greg because I don't remember if y'all had actually started up here yet or were praying about getting started.
Yeah.
But we actually were in the tent too.
Oh,
right
yeah.
Yeah.
So you were in the tent?
Yes, sir.
I didn't realize
we started in the little building beside the tent. Kim and I did. Church had been going maybe 6 weeks.
And tell them where that's at. Nobody knows where Fairleigh is.
It's fairly close to Wolf City and fairly close to Commerce, Texas. That's why I got the name Fairleigh.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. And so
Black List Dirt.
Yeah, you bet. So this is Jeff Bishop. Jeff, tell them what you do now.
Right now I pastor Ridin River Cowboy Fellowship in Bandera, Texas, and I'm the assistant director for American Fellowship of Cowboy Churches.
Yep. All right. So how long you been in Bandera?
I have been in Bandera since August of 2010.
Now, was that you, did you come in on the ground floor of that deal?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We, 2009, my wife had gotten a phone call from a mutual friend, had asked her about taking a position at Center Point, Texas, and neither one of us knew where Center Point was.
Yeah,
it's kind of like Fairleigh. It's just
That's
in the
right.
center of everything down there.
Yeah.
And, man, God just opened up some doors, and then we left in April of that was 2009, November 2009, left Commerce, and she left in April of 2010, and Cody and I stuck around to sell cows, tractors, land, houses, and all that stuff, and moved down there in August.
All right, so let's go back. You were part of the church start of Cross Trails in Fairleigh, and you were, when did you go on staff there?
That would have been, we started in 2002, going there, probably 2003. Greg and Shannon Shannon Moreland and Greg Horn were co-pastoring. Greg started looking at some other opportunities. We had outgrown that little bitty one-room church building, and they asked me to come on as kind of a youth pastor / associate pastor. And I really figured out why Shannon called me is he needed somebody to do the books, because the back of that Purina feed sack and that big cheap tablet that they've been doing everything on just wasn't working.
Oh, my goodness.
So started there 2003, and then really was staff 2004. Then Shannon left about 2.5 years later, 2006, 2007, and went full-time.
So most of you in the non-Cowboy church world that may be listening to our podcast, you heard it right. They were in a tent.
Yes.
I mean, a real tent. And so
real tent.
I bring my dad, my boys. We were checking out that cultic movement called the Cowboy Church movement in the early stages. And we went over that Sunday, beat anything, because I have a traditional Baptist background, so it beat anything I'd ever seen in my life. We pull up. It seemed to me like hundreds of cars on whatever little farm to market road that was. We parked a long way.
The name of that road. And the great thing about that story, Mike, is we were meeting in the little building next to the tent, Durham.
The old abandoned church.
The old abandoned church.
Yes.
When that church existed, it was a Baptist church one Sunday and a Methodist church the next Sunday. They bring in a traveling preacher. And so we outgrew that, and not long after y'all came, we were running 40 or so in that little building, had an anniversary service, 1-year anniversary. So Shannon rented that tent, or got the tent from the local Baptist Association. They set it up, and there were 180 plus people under that tent, and never dropped below that. So we just ended up keeping the tent forever.
And y'all were baptizing. Your stage was a gooseneck flatbed trailer.
Yes, sir.
There was a horse tank on the trailer.
On the trailer.
Y'all baptized that Sunday when I was there. and that kind of was part of the whole thing with me. All of us, is like Jason and I have talked about, you and I have talked about it a million times. We really, in the early days of the movement, the Cowboy Church movement, we were all about just lowering barriers. If anybody didn't feel comfortable in a traditional church setting, we created that. But you would have never thought in a million years that somebody would do outside church in August. And they just kept coming. They just kept
all the
coming.
time. And even today, driving up here, of course, it's 30-something degrees today. It brings back memories from baptisms under that tent.
Oh, man.
Because I can remember, and I can remember the guys. Stephen Talley was one of them. He was the main one out there. I think it was his dad, Stanford Talley, would be out there with fish cookers, boiling water to pour in that blue poly trough, because if they didn't, the water would be frozen.
Oh, my gosh.
And Shannon got up to preach one Sunday about like this, and they had boiled water. We had baptisms, and there was so much steam coming off of the horse trough that you couldn't see the stage. That was before Smoking Lights ever thought about it.
I started to say that was y'all's version. That was Fairly version.
That's Fairly version of Smoking Lights.
Yeah. So, but it kind of, your story, it kind of transformed into a pastorate, didn't it?
It did. They, the real story behind that youth pastor deal is we had outgrown that little building. I mean, it was just tight. So Shannon had asked me one Sunday. He knew that Kim and I had a background from we came from a Baptist church. And Of course, the side story of that is I didn't want to go to Cowboy Church. That was entirely my wife's idea. Thought that was a great idea. We visit out there.
Wow.
We'd been in Sunday school at First Baptist there in Commerce with Greg and Shannon and some other couples that were there. And she said, we ought to go check it out. And I'm thinking, I'm not going out there. I know all them guys, So anyway, that's a whole nother pig trail. But we started going. We outgrew that little building. And I remember the Sunday Greg came up to me and he said, man, would you mind going out underneath this oak tree and just take the teenage, we probably had, 10 or 12 teenage boys that were coming. And he said, would you just take the teenage boys out there underneath that tree during the service? We need their spot inside the building. And then he had another lady, Miss Christie, took the girls to the other side, teenage girls. And that's how that kind of evolved. But Christy and I got together and we carried the kids to an Acquire the Fire conference. That is where Redneck met Modern in Dallas, Texas. You were talking about a hotel story. I carried a group of teenagers over there, stadium, singing. Man, they were singing songs I'd never heard before, but it was good stuff. Christian rap and all that. And remember at that point that just my childhood, remember this is what the Lord called me to do.
Amen.
And that's the moment I surrendered over there. So that really is where it started, is at Acquire the Fire in Dallas, Texas. And then I came back. That's the Sunday. That was on a Friday, Saturday. I got back Sunday afternoon. Monday morning, Greg calls, and he says, hey, can you go meet Shannon out at the church? And I get out to the church, and I'm telling Shannon my story I just told you. Man, the Lord's calling me into this. I don't know what it looks like. I'm a firefighter. But I'm here to help. And Shannon just starts crying, and I'm thinking, well, crap, I just made the preacher cry. It must not have been from God.
Oh, no.
That morning at sunrise, Shannon and Greg had met, and Greg had resigned as co-pastor, and he said, you need to get with Jeff Bishop today. And that's when I called Shannon. I didn't know about that story till after, but I'd called Shannon and said, hey, can I meet you out at the church? So that's where it all began,
So,
scene of the crime, I guess.
Yeah. So, on a real personal note, you've mentioned Kim a couple, 2 or 3 times. Tell us a little bit about your family. Who are they?
Married Kim. Her name was Kim Athey, Kim Bishop now, and we have one son, Cody Bishop, lives over here in Henderson. Most importantly, Cody has blessed us with two beautiful granddaughters.
That's it.
That's one reason I was a little late getting started this morning.
No
was
problem.
with one. Yeah. And but Kim and I met back I guess in 1985, and she was actually dating my best friend, fishing buddy. They had split up, and then about 6 weeks after they split up, we were going to church together, and I said, hey, let's go get a Coke. And history rewrote itself. But most beautiful thing is I gained a partner in life. God designed her for me.
Yes.
But man, I lost a good friend with a nice bass boat. but it was worth every bit.
Oh,
of it.
my goodness.
Cody was born in '92. He'll be 30 this weekend.
Yeah,
Cannot
how about
believe
that?
that.
I know it.
And
Yeah, I can't
And
either.
we are blessed. He is
Grow
plugged
up.
in his church and serving the Lord. So
You bet. You bet.
been incredible. Good people.
So, again, a lot of our listeners are not familiar with the American Fellowship of Cowboy Churches, and then a lot of our listeners are, avid supporters, been active. I watched some of the feedback last week with Jason, and it was some of the old guys,
Right.
old guys, and Tuffy's hollering at me, and some of these other guys that I was in AFCC leadership. So
Sure.
you and I, our history goes all the way back, way before AFCC was even a vision.
Absolutely.
You and I go back to the Texas Fellowship.
Yeah, and really,
of
Mike,
Cowboy
if you
churches.
think about it, we probably go back to before Texas Fellowship
No,
of Cowboy
that's right.
Churches actually came into
Yes,
existence.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
even though first church that's affiliated with us started in 2020, there was the one in Brownwood and then the one at Ellis County, which Ellis County's kind of always been the flagship.
Absolutely.
But it wasn't until the end of 2003, 2004 that TFCC officially came into existence. And of course, you guys,
you were like the seventh church, though, right?
we were.
Yeah. So
Cross Trails
fairly,
was the
Cross Trails Cowboy Church was the seventh church in what would be developed into the Texas Fellowship of Cowboy Churches.
TFCC, that's right.
And long before we were trying to make a name for ourselves, and just keep momentum in the movement. I mean, y'all were, what was the radio or the TV station overseas that came in and did a documentary on Cross Trails?
It was actually a newspaper. It was USA Today.
Oh, no, there was another one.
I
Did you
don't
not know
remember the
about it?
TV station.
Oh, yeah, it was, I don't, of course, Ukraine is on my brain today, but
British Broadcasting.
was it British Broadcasting?
Yeah, BBC.
Okay.
BBC, because BBC ended up at Ridin the River about 5 years ago and did a radio spot on that. And when I got to talking to this lady, and I was telling her some of the history behind that, I'd forgot about that, but it was BBC because I was talking to her about that and told her about the USA Today article and the BBC, and she went back and researched that stuff, and she used some of that footage.
And that's crazy.
Or some of the dialogue on her radio broadcast that went all over Eastern Europe.
Yeah. Y'all were getting traction long before the association and the fellowship was getting traction, but it blew up. I was part of the with the former executive director Gary Morgan, and I drove down to Waco, where were told by Paul Powell, who of course is deceased, was a big First Church pastor here in Tyler, and was just so enamored with cowboy churches and what we were doing and the reach, because the first few years it was like wildfire.
Oh, that Waco school that you're talking about, that to me, that was the fire that really set a lot of this stuff off. That was the momentum that got a lot of things started back then.
I think so.
A lot of great men came out of that school that went on to pastor cowboy churches. I'm sitting here thinking, you were talking about some of the older guys. I think of Tracy Williams and Mike Moss, and and a lot of those guys were at that clinic, and that's where they have surrendered to that.
Isn't that
call.
crazy?
It is.
I nearly surrendered, but it was to the Baylor Police Department. That was where I got my pickup stuck in my headache rack got stuck in the
I remember that as well.
Parking garage. Yeah. I swear,
they were not designed for cowboys to come to.
No, and the paradox in all this is that when we walk in, we look like we look, and so many of those guys, I mean, literally stepped off a horse. They were called from the pasture to the pastorate, kind of clueless, no seminary training, no formal training for most of them. Right. And they walked into that building at Baylor on the, the religious side of the campus or something like that. That may have sounded wrong. I don't know. But
I just go and say the Holy of Holies.
The Holy of Holies. And they got I remember, you remember that organ?
I do remember that organ.
But it cost $1 bajillion.
Absolutely.
Man. And I was figuring some of them guys was trying to figure out a way to put a cherry bombs or something on it to give it some pop while we were there.
Absolutely.
But everything about that building was so not us. But you're right. That just proves that God can take something that, we don't expect. Mm-hmm. He can use context, buildings, geography, and especially people, some of the roughest bunch we've ever seen in our life,
That's right.
We everything had to be PG-13 there. I guess that's why we couldn't let Jason Taylor speak at some of those
I'm not
things.
sure Jason was around, but that probably would have changed the whole dynamics of TFCC.
It would have at Baylor.
Yeah,
it would have at Baylor. And so you and I both, when did you begin to take an active role in the association or the fellowship?
My first active role, Shannon was serving on board of directors, and I don't remember the circumstances, but Shannon needed to step away from that. So when Shannon stepped away, they had asked me to come in and fill the remainder of his term on the board of directors, which I think it was about a 6-month deal. Okay. But after that 6 months, then the next time it rolled around, they put me back on the board for a while. And then I was off the board for a while, but my active role started there. Yeah. It really started, we were trying to put together what has evolved into the annual gathering. Started out as, at that time, there were only probably maybe 50 churches in TFCC. Yeah. And there were about 5 churches got together, and we were going to do this big rodeo. We'd been contacted by Mesquite Arena. Yep. And some of the folks that worked for Donnie Gay back then, or the Gays, not Donnie Gay, for the Gays. Sure. And so they were going to host this deal, and we were meeting in Terrell, Texas, planning this event, and that thing kind of fell apart right at the end. I mean, the last month of it, Mesquite Arena pulled out on us and all that, so we ended up having it at Ellis County. That's right. And that's what evolved into the annual gathering. So as far as an active role, it started there, and then it started with the camps as well, Cowboy camps that we've been doing. Yeah. This will be the 18th year of Cowboy camp. So
you are, tell us a little bit about what your role is now in the American Fellowship of Cowboy Churches, because you're pastoring full time, right?
Yes, sir.
Of course, if some of them look down their noses at you, you got to understand that Cowboy Church is designed to. You got a pastor with a pack. Absolutely. It does not depend on you. The rise and fall of Bandera does not begin or end with you.
No, I got emails or text messages this morning wanting to know why they'd canceled the men's Bible study, and it's because there's a half an inch of ice on the ground. It's like, guys, I'm not even there. And they say, we didn't know you'd left town.
That's right.
But I'm blessed to have a co-pastor up there, and you're right, we pastor in a pack. Blessed with 9 lay pastors, 3 incredible elders. And it's just like, man, it just keeps rolling no matter what. Somebody's going to be there to carry on the ministry.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, that does consume a lot of my time. I don't know that there really is such a thing as a part-time pastor.
No.
I think all of them are full-time, part-time pay and all that.
Part-time pay.
So, I pastor the church there. My role with AFCC has taken on a lot of different dynamics in the last 10 years. Served as interim director for a while, and then when brought Todd Mitchell on as director, stayed on, and I handle a lot of the business side, but they've allowed me to still fulfill my passion, and that's with student ministry, to work with the camps. I've told everybody, and they think I'm joking, but I'm really not. But if I had to make a business card for AFCC, it would be head of sanitation.
Oh my gosh, do explain.
Cleaning up the messes.
Oh, yeah.
Cleaning up messes. And of course, we go way back, and that some of the things that we started in the early days, God has continued to bless because his plan is perfect, and he is going to fulfill those things. But we made a lot of mistakes back then in those days, and there's some messes that we've had to clean up. Now, it doesn't mean that they weren't necessary messes. All of us know sometimes making a mess makes you do it right the rest of the time. So it's a good thing. So spent a lot of time working with the business side of churches, helping them get that as well as just some intervention stuff. But I really don't like talking about the negative side because there's not that much negative. It's seeing the church growth and being able to work with guys that have either been in the ministry for a while or that are just starting out. And hoping that they get a good, solid foundation. And I'll tell them straight up, Mike, is I don't have all the answers, but I can dang sure tell you what not to do.
Yeah, old man. We can write a book on that stuff.
Absolutely.
How many churches are in AFCC now?
About 182
really
right now.
182?
Yes, 182 that are affiliated.
I don't know where Crossbrand landed.
Crossbrand's probably going to
Under
be
15th or 20th.
under 15, I would think.
Yeah.
Possibly 20,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. And
right,
we talk
right at the beginning.
Yeah, we talk about, the flagship church, but Ellis County, they were the focal point at one time.
Yes, sir.
They had the initial drive and the initial vision, and we have relied on them and Gary through the years. How many camps are y'all doing now?
We're doing 7 camps. We've done 7 the last few years. We had 3 in Oklahoma, 2 teen camps, a preteen camp, a preteen and a teen camp in Alabama, and then West Texas out at Big Country Baptist Assembly have a teen and a preteen camp.
How many kids is that going to cover?
Last year, historically, we've run about 2,800
Oh, my
students.
goodness.
2,800 campers, yeah. Pretty incredible, considering the first one, there were 65 people total at the very first camp we ever did. That was at Sabine Creek, and that included the camp facility, the speaker, the band, all the camper sponsors.
Quinlan?
No, in Royce City.
Royce City.
Yeah, Royce City. And I think we even included the dogs and the horses over there.
You did. Well, what about the next camp where we was toting kids in gooseneck cattle trailers?
That was at Buffalo Ridge.
Yeah.
And that facility, Whitney, Texas, close to the lake. And we'd outgrown the original facility, and there was I think it was a Presbyterian or something. I don't remember, a camp next door to it. They let us cut the barbed wire fence, and we used their dorms, and we bust.
No way. I'd forgotten about that.
We cut
was
the
you
barbed
part of
wire
that, Taylor?
fence.
Any of those? Yeah, those camps. Yeah.
So that's with Rick and Vicki Dawson. We're part of that, and from
Ellis County folks,
Ellis County folks. So we figured out real quick that the vans and all that stuff wouldn't cross that pasture, so we just hooked up some stock trailers. And
literally, people wouldn't believe that. I don't know how many laws we broke.
Of course, we locked the gate on all of them. So they couldn't get out to get under a trailer.
Again, those laws we were talking about.
Yeah,
yeah. If you were to pick 2 or 3 wins, in other words, if you were to say, look, I'm just going to narrow this down. Here are the wins in the American Fellowship of Cowboy Churches. What are those? What are your wins right now?
Oh, my goodness. To me, the greatest win, I think, came about, and again, we've talked TFCC, Texas Fellowship of Cowboy Churches, and American Fellowship of Cowboy Churches, and there was some profound vision that started looking beyond Texas borders.
That's right.
Outside of the state.
That's right.
But for a couple of years there, we were operating with one body with 2 heads. So to me, the greatest win came about in 2011 when we said, you know what, we're not going to have Texas Fellowship of Cowboy Churches and American Fellowship of Cowboy Churches. Texas is part of America. So we still legally are Texas Fellowship of Cowboy Churches, but we filed a DBA that year. I went down to the courthouse in Waxahachie, filed a doing business as American Fellowship of Cowboy Churches, and we became one unified body. So if I had to pick one of the greatest wins, it was eliminating the division that used to be between the states, and saying, hey, we're one body. We're one fellowship.
Yes, sir. Which one was the first? Do you remember? I'm fixing to really push on you here. Do you remember the first non-Texas Cowboy church in the association?
Oh, no, my goodness.
That might be for some of our listeners.
That would be, that would be something.
We're going to have some guys that are going to take claim of that, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Probably be Josh or somebody like that.
My gut would say it would probably be Alabama.
Yeah.
But it possibly could be one of the Arkansas churches or Louisiana as well that were right outside of the state.
So before we move on, though, so it kind of went Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Alabama kind of were the first 3 states to really pursue, right?
Yes, sir.
And before I move you on to your second win, where are they now? Got them in Colorado, New Mexico.
You are putting me on task. I know we've got New Mexico, Utah, Arizona. There's one in California, Oklahoma.
Do Arkansas. Californians do church?
there's a small part out there that is saved.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. I thought so. Taylor told me Florida. We got Florida churches.
Florida, North Carolina, Tennessee, Minnesota. That's the one that shocked me, Minnesota. I'm talking about just 20 miles north of the Twin Cities.
Wow.
The church up there.
Isn't that crazy?
It's amazing. Yeah. So Kansas, can't forget Kansas is up there.
Well, if you have forgotten anything, I'm telling you, we're going to hear from it. Kathy's going to be getting
Send me an email. I'm good at getting hate mail. Send it to
we'll
me.
get you.
No, better yet, send it to Mike, and then he'll send it to me.
Yes, and I am highly in love with hate mail. So you just send it to me. So the win was the move to more of a national.
I think
fellowship.
It was towards a national light, but I think it's deeper than that. It created an incredible amount of unity in the organization because there was some disunity. There were the out-of-state churches viewed themselves as being separate, and Texas we are from Texas, but at the same time, we kind of, there was a separation there. So it brought unity into the body is the biggest thing. I don't know that it was so much to look at it from a national standpoint. It just made us look at it that God's stretching this thing beyond all the borders.
Big C
church.
You bet.
Absolutely.
Body of Christ in a universal type fashion. I see that.
Yeah.
I see that. That's a win. That's definitely
a huge win. And of course, Jeremy and I've had this discussion at the church all the time. I believe my greatest responsibility as a pastor is to protect the unity in the body of Christ in our local group.
Yep.
So if that's what the fellowship of Cowboy churches is about, then the leadership, meaning the board of directors, and the staff that works for the leadership, which is partly, I work for the board of directors, then our greatest responsibility as an organization is to protect unity in that fellowship.
Yeah.
And not create separation, but also not water down what it is God's called us to do and stand firm on what it is God's called us to do. So,
what's some other wins?
Other wins, definitely the Cowboy camps, to see the, sitting here looking at Miss Taylor across the table. I think back to people that have been a part of the Cowboy camps over the last 15 years, and to now see them serving actively in churches. I'm a little biased on that somewhat because I'm blessed my son and my daughter-in-law met through the camps.
And I was just fixing to say that. Yeah. How many marriages have come out of the dadgum, Cowboy camp?
A lot. I quit counting at about 6, and that's because
I know Andrew got a good one, but I don't know about the rest of them.
Well,
Jared Hill got a good one.
Jared Hill.
Cody got a good one.
Cody, Logan Moore, Hunter Heim, all of those kids, just build relationships.
Y'all better be tagging all these kids that we're bragging on them.
That's exactly right. Except for Hunter, don't tag him. I don't want him to know. I don't want him to know I'm bragging on him.
All right.
Not him or Logan either. Man, never mind. Don't tag any of them and tell them me. Just tag them for Mike. So, but now camps have been, I think, a highlight on that aspect to see the growth in the leadership of that. The numerical side of it is incredible to see how God's worked, but really to see the spiritual growth that came out of some of those students that have now gone on to be young men and women that are serving in their church. Right. And not only that, their kids are serving.
Yeah, it's
in
crazy
churches as well.
Yeah.
So
we're blessed. We're blessed.
So
the expansion. Can you think of any other more wins before I ask you a terrible question?
I can just imagine what that's going to be. I think the other win is somewhat goes with that, connecting that building the unity, the American fellowship, but seeing work throughout the states. Yeah. We've done a few events over the years. We set up a booth out at the NFR, the National Finals Rodeo. Bet. Had some fruit come from that. We set up at the high school rodeos for a while. In fact, Travis Wright, who was youth pastor here for a while, initiated that deal. So some of those things, the byproduct of that have been able to reach people. I remember years ago you used to talk about the greatest challenge in Cowboy Church, the greatest ministry of Cowboy Church is reaching into the corners. It's catching those people in the corners that just go undetected, riding the corners.
That's right.
And so to me, the greatest win is AFCC now is being able to ride the corners freely again and with focus on that as well.
So this is not a bad question, but it's, we don't, it's just like, AFCC, just like life. It's got plenty of storms. It's got plenty of challenges, plenty of struggles. What are some of your, in your perspective, what are some of the challenges, the greatest challenges moving forward in the American Fellowship of Cowboy churches right now?
I think of course, looking at this thing from a broad scale is just the challenges on Christianity today. We see what's happening in Finland. We see what's happening in Ukraine as we speak. Canada, another one. We see a lot of that stuff. So that's going to be somewhat, but that's probably the PC answer to this deal, to see that
it's going to be tough.
But it's going to be tough. I think, to me, one of the things that's both a positive and a negative is the model that we started teaching years ago. I think has been fantastic. I think that's been part of the reason we've seen Cowboy Church thrive, why we've seen God use it in a miraculous way, and God's kingdom impacted by it. But like anything else, there was a time when the model got escalated up higher than the mission of what it was called to accomplish.
Sure.
And we preached the model more than we preached the ministry. So that, to me, that's going to be something else of cleaning those things up. But as we move into 2022 and years to come, I think the organization getting back to what it was originally called to do, train, mentor, connect, communicate, and assist in new starts and new affiliates is going to be instrumental, but it's a great challenge.
Do you think people would are there folks that would disagree with your statement about elevating the mission or elevating the model over the mission?
I'm sure there are.
You think so?
Yeah, I'm sure there are some that would, and Mike, you and I both know this, is in the early days, man, we thought you had to tell a cowboy story and everybody had to have on a hat and a pair of tall top boots and smell a little bit like manure in order to be effective in reaching this culture. What we've learned in the last few years, at least let me rephrase that, what I've learned in the last few years is, man, just like the younger generation, they just want something real.
Yeah.
They want you to be real. They want that transparency. And, man, the Bible is the oldest book around. The gospel still speaks in spite of what we mess it up.
Yeah.
And they just want to hear truth.
Yeah.
So when we're able to just put aside all of that stuff, and to me, like I said, the model is effective. The model's good. But the only thing that makes the model work is Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And if we fail to preach Jesus and just preach the model, then things wreck out. And I think that's where we saw in some churches.
And again, referencing our listeners that are not familiar with Cowboy Church terminology and all this history, we talk about the model. He and I know exactly what we're talking about. Everybody in this room knows about what we're talking about. But we designed a protocol in the early days, and we called it the model. It was a method of doing church.
Yeah, the church leadership structure is what it is, because I know both of us have a Baptist background, and we grew up with that deacon body and that stuff, and we've gone to an elder model, and of course that may wig some of the listeners out thinking, oh, they're Church of Christ or something like that. No, we're trying to mirror what the leadership structure looks like
in the New Testament.
Yeah,
that's
just
all we want.
New Testament church.
That's all we want.
Some of it's semantics on what you name people.
That's
there,
right.
But it does boil down to the leadership structure of a New Testament church.
Yeah,
So, the model could be confusing for a lot of people, but really it's just a leadership structure.
And what we had in that Jeff may be talking about that was a little bit controversial at times. And, even at Cross Brand, we have dropped some of our verbiage from our bylaws. In other words, we don't believe that you have to be a ranch owner or involved hardcore in the Western heritage culture to be in leadership at Cross Brand. We had to pull that down. I mean, we had to, Jeff, because that would have been elevating the model over the mission.
Most
in the original bylaws, there was wording that said, an elder couldn't be an elder at your church if he wasn't somehow connected to Western heritage culture. Yeah. Well, I'd a whole lot rather be connected to Jesus.
Absolutely.
And be in touch with hurting people, messy people, and have the biblical qualifications for elder than I had them wear a hat. And
most definitely. Yeah, none of that verbiage is in the recommended bylaws.
Oh, is it not anymore?
In the 2015s.
Yeah.
No, sir. That dates way back to 2004. I
Yeah.
believe the original
04,
ones
you
that
bet.
came out.
You
Yeah,
bet.
came
And
out.
listen, just it's not that we're picking on that. No. It's just we didn't have a blueprint to go by in the early days.
It's just like anything else, Mike. As you grow, you start learning. You know, I mean, I wish I knew as much when I was 18 as I do at 54.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh.
But I wouldn't go back to being 18 years old again.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like with the Cowboy Church movement, it's the same thing. As we've learned, you know, sometimes by mistake, but a lot of times just by, I believe, being discerning.
I don't think I
hit something underneath the table.
Oh, it was
either
Jeff.
a rattlesnake. Yeah, that was me.
I'm getting.
See, I was picking on Jason on banging on the table, and I'd about knocked the whole thing.
And they got to know this. Our listeners need to know that you and I both have been trained what to do with our hands. We can't touch the table, so this is really hard. So
this whole deal not leaning back.
You can't lean back. You can't touch the table because Jason Taylor nearly broke the table. And so, but Jeff Bishop kicks the table. So I'm sure there'll be a brand new set of rules for me to follow next time.
There'll be foam padding down here.
You bet. You bet. Well, that is truly a struggle. What's another huge challenge?
For me, and I think as the current board, is changing a mindset of an us and them. I remember years ago, Mike, and I'm trying to remember the guy's name that said, "We are second." I just had I
forgot it too.
But anyway, we somehow through the course of the growth of TFCC, AFCC, we've almost had an us and them. We've had the people, including myself, that work for AFCC, as well as the rest of the great staff we have, has viewed, well, that's the AFCC, and I'm cross-brander, I'm riding the river, but that's AFCC. It's changing the mindset of saying that, no, you're AFCC, I'm AFCC, because it is a fellowship. So, we talked about this. One way to go about that is maybe some marketing, just communication, dialogue of telling people, say, we are the AFCC.
Well, hopefully we're helping with that right now.
So I hope entirely that's what's helping.
And ultimately you remember the first meetings you and I sat in the 04s and 05s, we created TFCC, AFCC. It's to resource churches.
That's it.
It's to resource churches. We and when I was on staff at TFCC and AFCC, when I was on staff doing field staff stuff, we would often have people call and they would ask me, "Well, what does the AFCC approve in this?" Yeah. And we're not set up like the Catholic Church on some hierarchy. It's
not
local churches first.
That's right. We believe in that great big church word called the autonomy of the church.
That's right.
We believe in the autonomy of the church, but you're right. We're there to resource, to develop, serve, is what it is. And I think you're seeing, and I'm seeing through not only the staff that we have now, but through the board we have now, but even more importantly, through the churches that we have now, more of a servant's heart. How can we be involved? I love what one of my elders, Grady, always said this. He said, it used to aggravate me. People would come to church and they'd complain about the message, and they'd say something, man, I just didn't get anything out of church today. Or they'd go to a Bible study and say, I just didn't get anything out of that Bible study today. And Grady said, I learned a long time ago, I'm going to pass this on to you. He said, the way you respond to that is simply ask them, well, what did you bring to it?
There you go.
So when I'm thinking of AFCC, when people make that, what does AFCC do? My initial thought process goes to one of my elders, Grady, and say, well, what are you bringing to AFCC?
Oh, absolutely.
Because that's what you're going to get out of it, is what you're bringing to it.
Yeah.
And I think changing that mindset, that's a challenge, because for years we've kind of, at least 11, 12 years ago, that became kind of a focal point, is an us and them type mentality.
Yeah.
And now it is truly a we mentality.
Well, good.
So
good.
It's good stuff.
We've got Horse Gate coming up tomorrow. We pray, actually Saturday. What is today? Today's Thursday. So we've got Horse Gate coming up on Saturday, and we hope to see a lot of our brothers and sisters. But what we have found, one of the coolest things that you've got testing of the bulls that has been added over the last 10 or so years since we started doing Horsegate, which is a pastor's conference and leaders conference. You've got Unhobbled.
Yep, up in Alabama.
In Alabama, which is a pastor's wives conference, leadership conference. Are there others that I'm forgetting?
There is. There's a new one that a group started a couple of years ago called Corner Post out in Canyon, Texas. So out in the Panhandle, which a lot of those guys, it's a pretty good trek to get out here for them.
Yes,
so
it is.
Started Corner Post out there, and we're seeing a lot more local churches that are doing some men's gatherings or doing something similar to Horsegate on a smaller scale, for their bunches. The bunch ministry, which Todd initiated several years ago, and it goes back to the, cattle naturally bunching together. It's these pastors being able to naturally bunch together, which really, I say Todd initiated that. That actually started at this church with a pastors gathering. Right. The mentality of it started here when pastors from this area, and I can remember as I was sitting in that conference room a little earlier, I was thinking about how we started out with 7 or 8 pastors meeting in there. We drove over here from Commerce, and then the last one I remember we had, there were probably 30 of us crammed in that room. Right. And that's a big room, but 30 people, especially 30 Cowboy pastors, you're out of space.
And I hope the churches continue to do it. And if y'all are listening to me, please, you cannot imagine how, I'm preaching to the choir here, but you cannot imagine how hungry and how thirsty most local pastors are, student ministers, even some of the elders. They're thirsty and they're hungry, and they need that fellowship and they need that community. And it just does. I went to one here. It's not a Cowboy church deal. Matter of fact, I looked like I was out of place, but I went to one. I was there 2 hours. All we did is pray for one another and talk. And I came out of there. I felt like I'd gained 5 more years on the end of my lifespan, just being around some other guys that get it, that know it. Because, Absolutely. Well, and that, the other thing I wanted to point out on this too, that really was birthed as a result of Horsegate and just seeing the result of what happened is we started something a few years ago. It started in Tennessee with the youth pastor up at that church, Thousand Hills, but we call it the Timothy Project. And it was trying to instill a Timothy mindset into youth team workers. So anybody that's dealing with preteens or teenagers is just a time where they can come together and cuss, fuss, and discuss what's going on in ministry, but more importantly, to just encourage and motivate them and to try and get them to have an attitude of what Paul, when he took Timothy and he started training him, he knew that he needed somebody to carry on to replace himself. So it's really that whole mentality of just replace yourself. So Timothy Project to me is another huge win. This is just our second year into that, but so far we've had 3 in the last 6 months. Have another one coming up in March. Are they all in Tennessee?
No, they're scattered around. First one was in Tennessee. We've had one more in Tennessee, and then we had one out in Winters, Texas, in Parker County. Had one up there last year, and then the one's coming up in Jacksonville, Texas this year.
No way.
Yes, sir. March 27th.
Huh. Are y'all putting stuff out on that?
Should be coming out hopefully this weekend. I'm hoping that Homer was able to get some of our graphics people to get that stuff pulled together. But
and just putting a bug in your ear, y'all got a booth at Horsegate in 2 days.
Yes, sir.
Man, I wish y'all could get some of that information on the table. That would be I know it's old people like us that understand flyers and posters.
Right.
So, anyhow, more if you could put some of that stuff out Saturday.
Yeah, that we were trying to get some stuff so it'll be running in the loop on the commercials that come up during the breaks.
Oh, good.
As well as hopefully getting some hard copy stuff out.
All right. That I'm excited about that. You are Jeff Bishop. He is the pastor of Ridin the River Cowboy Church. Now, some of us used to get that confused. What was Tracy Williams? Sure. No.
Tracy Williams was double R.
Double R. And then what was, what's down there in Dublin?
Double R.
So there were 2 double R's?
No, let's see. Is that right?
I don't
What
know.
is?
They're
Double
fixing to
R.
tell us,
Yeah.
though. They're Riding the River Cowboy Church.
The river, riding the river, Cowboy Fellowship.
Red River.
Red River.
We are having to do
That's it.
charades.
I'm trying to figure
Oh,
this
my
out. It's like,
goodness. We are having to do charades over here with our help.
I'm afraid maybe I was unbuttoned somewhere on there.
Actually, this isn't the help. We are the help today.
That's
buddy.
right. Red River. That's
Yeah.
Red River.
Yeah.
Great job.
Listen, you've been my buddy and you've been my friend.
Man.
We have been able to have a relationship that consists of kicking and cussing and crying for years.
You must be talking about Youth Ranch Rodeo days.
You bet. Remember that
good times.
Remember that meeting we had at my house at the
I
ranch?
do remember that.
Had all them guys in there.
Yeah.
One of the boo-boos, that we did. And we have. I mean, I can probably count back as many mistakes as we have wins.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we didn't figure out or that we didn't put into the mix of things is when you put, I don't care how many times you put Jesus on a poster and it's rodeo, when you put competition with Jesus in that same context, you got trouble.
Absolutely.
You got trouble. Man, more
Sad
fighting.
part is you and I can both put names to the trouble on some of that stuff, but we won't do that.
No, we won't do that. They're listening.
They are listening.
They are listening.
Somebody's recording it.
Whoa. How about a parting shot?
Oh, parting shot, man. Get involved in your local church. That's where I'm at today.
And sometimes need to come back.
And come back. My parting shot is probably, you give a preacher an opportunity to preach. I'm going to preach just a minute. Is God's raising up a remnant.
Yes.
We're seeing that. I think the church has been tested over the last couple of years with the COVID crisis, with everything, with elections and all that stuff, with the politics. I think the church has been tested. I think it's been sifted and it's been pruned, but I believe strongly that God is raising a remnant right now. And people get down, they start looking at all the problems going on in the world, but I'm going to tell you, Mike, I'm excited.
Yes, sir.
Because I'm seeing that remnant starting to stand firm.
Yeah.
They're getting bold. They're ready to preach the word no matter what.
Yeah.
And my parting shot is, church, wake up.
Amen.
It's time for people to quit sleeping in the pew.
Amen.
And start being on the battle lines.
Amen. Folks, we appreciate you joining us today. We're for Withstood. This has been my friend and co-worker, Jeff Bishop. Look forward to seeing y'all again. God bless you.
Thank you, Mike.